The night settled gently over the village, not suddenly, not with darkness falling all at once, but slowly, as though the day itself had grown tired and chose to rest. A pale moon rose behind thin clouds, its light softened, spreading across the narrow paths, the low stone walls, and the small church that stood at the edge of the hill. Beside it lay the graveyard, old, quiet, and patient. The stones leaned at slight angles, worn smooth by years of rain and wind. Names had faded into the surface, their edges softened, as though time itself had passed over them with careful hands, and among them, moving slowly, without hurry, was the keeper. He carried a lantern. Its light was warm, steady, swinging gently with each step he took along the narrow path. The glow reached only a little way into the darkness, just enough to show the ground beneath his feet, just enough to reveal the shapes of the stones nearby. Beyond that, the night remained undisturbed. He did not mind. The graveyard was not a place of fear to him. It was a place of quiet, a place where the world spoke more softly, where the wind moved without interruption, and where time did not rush. His name was Elias. Few in the village spoke it after sunset, not because they feared him, but because they rarely saw him. By day, he rested. By night, he walked, slowly, carefully, always the same path, from the church door, along the first row of stones, past the old yew tree, and down toward the far wall where the ground dipped slightly, then back again, always the same, always unhurried. The lantern swayed, step and sway, step and sway. The rhythm had become part of him. From the church tower above, a bell hung in stillness. It was not large, nor polished, nor often used. It was an old bell, one that had been placed there many years ago, for a purpose that few now remembered. It did not ring for the hour. It did not call the village to prayer. It rang, only rarely, and only when needed. Elias paused beneath the tower, as he did each night. He lifted his lantern slightly, letting the light touch the wooden beams above, the rope that hung down, and the shadow it cast against the stone wall. Still, always still, he listened. Not for anything in particular, just listening. The wind moved softly through the branches of the yew tree. Somewhere in the distance, a dog barked once, then fell silent. The village slept. The graveyard breathed, and Elias stood, quiet, waiting, as though the night itself might speak. After a moment, he lowered the lantern again. Nothing, as expected. He turned and continued his walk. At the far edge of the yard, the ground dipped slightly, and the stones grew older. Here, the names were almost gone. Only faint marks remained, lines worn shallow by time. Elias walked more slowly here, not because the ground was uneven, but because this part of the yard felt different, quieter, as though even the wind passed more gently between the stones. He stopped beside one grave. There was no name, only a smooth surface and a small crack running through it. He rested the lantern on the ground beside him. For a moment, he stood in silence. Then, slowly, he knelt, not in prayer, not in ritual, just stillness. It had been many years since he had first taken this duty. The villagers had asked for someone to watch the grounds at night, to keep the place tended, to ensure that nothing was disturbed, and Elias had agreed, not for coin, not for recognition, but because he preferred the quiet. The night asked nothing of him. It did not hurry him. It did not expect him to speak. It simply allowed him to be. The lantern flickered slightly. A small movement of flame, then steadied again. Elias noticed, but did not react. The night often shifted in small ways. A breath of wind, a change in air, nothing unusual. He stood once more, lifted the lantern, and turned back toward the church. The bell rope hung motionless. The door remained closed. The stones remained still. Everything was as it had always been. Elias began his return. Step and sway, step and sway. The lantern's light moved gently across the ground, touching the edges of the path, the base of the stones, the roots of the tree. And then he stopped, not suddenly, not in alarm, but slowly, as though something had reached him. Without sound, he listened. At first, there was nothing, only the wind, only the quiet, only the steady presence of the night. Then, very faintly, "15," it might have been imagined, there came a sound, a soft, distant metal note, not loud, not clear, just a single, quiet vibration. Elias did not move. He did not turn. He did not raise the lantern. He simply stood and listened. The sound did not come again. The night closed around him once more, as though nothing had happened. After a long moment, he continued walking, slowly, as before, but when he passed beneath the tower again, he did not look up. The rope remained still. The bell did not move. And yet, somewhere in the quiet of the graveyard, something had been heard. The fire in the church vestry burned low. The wind softened. The village slept. And the keeper walked, as he always did, through the night, carrying his lantern, along the same quiet path, beneath the same silent bell. Morning came quietly to the village, not with brightness, not with noise, but with a pale light that touched the rooftops first, then the narrow road, and finally the small church upon the hill. The graveyard rested beneath it, still, unchanged. The stones held their places, the paths remained soft with dew, and the old yew tree stood in its usual silence, its branches unmoving in the early air. Nothing appeared disturbed. Nothing suggested that anything had passed through the night, except time itself. Elias returned as the sky began to lighten. His lantern had grown dim, its flame low and steady, as though it too were ready to rest. He paused at the gate, as he always did. He turned once, his eyes moving slowly across the yard, the stones, the tree, the church, and the tower above. The bell hung where it always had, still, silent. He watched it for a moment longer. Then, without thought or concern, he lowered his gaze and stepped inside. The church door closed softly behind him. Within, the air was cool. It carried the faint scent of old wood, stone, and candle wax. A small fire had been lit in the vestry, though it had already begun to fade. Its warmth lingered only slightly, like the memory of a voice. Elias set his lantern upon the table. He removed his coat slowly, folding it with care, placing it in the same place he always did. Routine, simple, steady, familiar. He did not hurry. There was no need. The bell, the thought did not come suddenly. It arrived gently, as thoughts often do when the body begins to rest. A memory, a small sound, faint, almost nothing. Elias sat. His hands rested loosely in his lap. He closed his eyes. He had heard something. He was certain of it. Not loud, not clear, but present, a single tone. Soft, distant, metal. The bell. He opened his eyes again. The vestry was quiet. The fire had settled further into embers. Nothing moved. Elias did not rise. He did not go to the tower. There was no urgency in him, no fear, only awareness. The bell had not rung. It could not have. It was not used, not for many years, and yet he let the thought pass. A cloud, moving slowly across the sky, unnoticed. Once it had gone, he stood, moved to the narrow bed in the corner of the room, and lay down. Sleep came easily. Outside, the village began its day. Footsteps along the road, a door opening, voices, soft, familiar, without urgency. A cart rolled past, its wheels steady against the earth. Life resumed, as it always did. The church remained quiet, the graveyard still, the bell unmoving, and Elias slept. The day passed without event. The sun moved slowly across the sky, its light shifting from pale gray to a warmer tone, then softening again as evening approached. Clouds gathered, then thinned, never quite settling into one shape. The wind moved gently. Nothing changed. When Elias woke, the light had already begun to fade. He rose without haste. There was no need to mark the hour. He knew it, as one knows the rhythm of breath or the turning of seasons. He lit his lantern. The flame caught slowly, then steadied, warm, reliable. He stepped outside once more. The air had cooled. The village had quieted. Windows glowed faintly in the distance, small points of light against the coming night. The graveyard awaited him, as it always did. He began his walk. Step and sway, step and sway. The lantern moved gently at his side. Its light reached out, then fell away, touching the path, the stones, the edges of shadow. Nothing had changed. And yet, something felt different. Not wrong, not disturbed, just noticed. Elias moved toward the tower, slowly, as he always did. He stopped beneath it. The rope hung before him, still, straight, untouched. He raised the lantern. The light climbed the stone wall, rested upon the beam, and found the bell above, silent. He watched it, not searching, not questioning, simply looking. The memory of the sound returned, faint, distant. He listened. The wind passed through the branches of the yew tree. A leaf shifted against stone. Somewhere beyond the wall, something moved, then settled. Nothing more. Elias lowered the lantern. He reached out, not quickly, not with intention, just slowly, until his hand rested lightly upon the rope. It was cold, still. He held it there for a moment, then released it. The rope did not move. Elias turned and continued his walk. The path led him again toward the far edge of the yard, toward the older stones. The ground dipped slightly beneath his feet. The air felt cooler there, quieter. He slowed. The nameless grave stood where it always had, smooth, unmarked. Elias approached. The lantern light settled across its surface, revealing the thin crack that ran from edge to edge. He stood beside it. For a long moment, nothing happened. Then, the lantern flickered, not from wind, not from movement. A brief, gentle shift. Elias watched the flame. It steadied again. He listened. The graveyard held its breath, and then, very softly, from somewhere above, or perhaps somewhere within, the sound came again, a single, quiet, metal tone, not loud, not sharp, just present. Elias did not look up. He did not move. The sound faded. The night closed again around him. The wind returned. The tree whispered. The village slept. Nothing had changed. And yet, Elias remained where he stood, the lantern held steady in his hand, the nameless grave before him, the silent tower behind him, listening. As though something had spoken, not to the ear, but to the quiet space beneath it. After a time, he turned. He walked back toward the church. Step and sway, step and sway. But this time, as he passed beneath the tower, he stopped, slowly, very slowly. He lifted his eyes. The bell hung above him, still, unmoving, and yet he did not leave. He stood there, in the quiet, beneath the old bell, waiting. The night deepened without notice, not darker, not heavier, just quieter. The village had settled fully into sleep. Windows that had once glowed softly were now dim, their light fading behind curtains and closed shutters. The road lay empty, no footsteps, no voices, only the occasional shift of wind, moving lightly along the ground, touching stone, passing through branches, and disappearing again. The church stood, as it always had, still, watching. And beneath the tower, Elias remained. He did not move at once. He did not reach for the rope again. He simply stood, his lantern casting a small, steady circle of light at his feet, and listened. The bell hung above him, silent, unmoving. The rope remained straight, untouched. Nothing in its shapes suggested movement. Nothing in its shadow hinted at sound. And yet he had heard it. Elias did not question the thought. He did not search for reason. The night did not ask for such things. It only asked that one remain and listen. After a time, he lifted the lantern slightly. The light rose with it, climbing the stone wall, touching the wooden beams, and settling once more upon the bell. The surface was dull with age, not polished, not cared for in many years. It was not meant to be seen. It was meant to wait. Elias watched it, still. The flame in his lantern moved gently. A small shift, then steadiness again. No wind reached here, not beneath the tower. The stone held the air in place, and yet the flame had moved. Elias lowered the lantern. He turned. The graveyard stretched before him once more, familiar, unchanged. He began to walk, step and sway, step and sway. The path curved slowly around the church, past the first row of stones, past the yew tree, toward the far edge where the ground dipped low. The same path, the same rhythm, and yet his steps were quieter now, not slower, not cautious, just softer, as though he had begun to listen, not only to the night, but to the spaces within it. The lantern light passed across the stones. Names appeared, then faded, letters worn smooth by years of rain, edges softened until they were no longer sharp. Elias did not read them. He had walked this path too many times. The names no longer belonged to the stones. They belonged to the silence. The yew tree stood ahead. Its branches reached outward, dark against the sky, still, but not empty. Elias paused beside it, as he often did. The air here felt different, not colder, not heavier, just deeper. The lantern light touched the trunk, rough bark, deep lines. Something shifted above. A branch moved slightly. Though the wind had not reached it, Elias did not look up. He listened. The movement stopped. The tree returned to stillness. Elias continued on. The ground dipped beneath his feet, the older part of the yard. Here, the stones leaned more. Some had sunk slightly into the earth. Others stood alone, their markings gone. The nameless grave waited where it always had, smooth, unmarked. Elias approached. The lantern light settled upon it. He stood. The night gathered round him. For a moment, nothing happened. Only the quiet, only the slow movement of air across the ground. Then a sound, not from above, not from the bell, from somewhere, lower, closer, a faint, soft shift, as though something had moved beneath the earth. Elias did not step back. He did not raise the lantern. He listened. The sound did not come again. The grave remained still, the stone unchanged. The night closed over the moment. Elias knelt, not quickly, not in response, just as he had done before. He placed the lantern beside him. The light rested low, casting long, quiet shadows across the ground. His hand touched the edge of the stone. Cold, smooth, he left it there. The silence deepened. And then, very faintly, so faint it might have been carried through memory rather than air, the bell sounded again, a single, soft tone, not above him, not distant, but near. Elias lifted his head. Slowly, his eyes moved, not to the tower, but to the space around him. The graveyard held its breath. The trees were still, the stones unmoving. The bell rope, far behind him, did not stir. And yet, the sound had been there, present, clear. Elias stood. He lifted the lantern. The flame flickered once, then steadied. He turned. The tower rose in the distance, its shape dark against the sky, unchanged. The bell hung where it always had, silent. Elias began to walk back, step and sway, step and sway. But this time, he did not follow the path exactly. Near the center of the yard, he stopped. There, set slightly apart from the others, stood a smaller stone. Its surface was worn, but not empty. A mark remained, not a name, a symbol, faint, 4 small lines drawn close together. Elias stepped nearer. The lantern light touched the stone. The lines became clearer, not carved deeply, not recently, but placed with intention. He looked at it. The mark did not belong to the others. It had not been here before, or it had not been seen. Elias did not reach out. He did not touch it. He simply stood, watching, listening. The night moved gently around him. The wind returned. The tree whispered. And somewhere, beyond sound, beyond movement, something waited. Elias lifted the lantern slightly. The light spread outward, touching the nearby stones, the path, the ground. Everything remained as it was, and yet he did not continue his walk. He stood there, in the quiet, between the tower and the nameless grave, watching the small, worn mark, as though it had been waiting, not to be found, but to be noticed. The night did not change. It did not deepen, nor grow darker. It simply continued. Elias remained where he stood. The lantern rested in his hand, its light steady, warm, and small against the wide, quiet yard. Before him, the stone, smaller than the others, set slightly apart, its surface worn, but not empty. The mark remained, 4 faint lines, drawn close together, as though placed with care, and then left. Elias did not move closer. He did not reach out. He simply stood, allowing the moment to settle, the way the night always did, without hurry. The wind moved softly along the ground. It passed between the stones, touching them lightly, then moving on. The yew tree whispered once, then fell still again. Nothing else stirred, and yet the space around the stone felt different. Not disturbed, not wrong, just present. Elias lowered the lantern slightly. The light shifted, spreading across the ground, touching the edge of the stone, then falling away again. The mark remained where it was, unchanged. He had walked this path many nights, many years. He knew the shapes of the stones, the spaces between them, the way the ground rose and fell. This stone had always been here, and yet the mark had not, or it had not been seen. Elias took a slow step forward. The lantern moved with him. Its light climbed the surface of the stone, revealing the lines more clearly now. They were not deep, not carved by tool or blade. They were drawn, pressed into the surface lightly, as though made by hand rather than force. 4 lines, simple, close. Elias watched them. He did not try to understand. The night did not ask for understanding, only attention. He stood there for a long time. Time passed without measure. The lantern burned steadily. The wind came and went. The village remained asleep. Nothing changed. And yet the feeling remained, a quiet awareness, like a sound just beyond hearing, or a word almost remembered. Elias turned his head slightly. The tower stood behind him, dark against the sky. The bell hung where it always had, still, silent. The rope did not move. He listened. No sound came. The night held its quiet. Elias turned back to the stone. The mark remained, unmoving, unchanged. And yet, it did not feel old. It felt recent, not new, but remembered. Elias knelt, slowly, carefully, until he was level with the stone. The lantern rested beside him. The light fell low, casting long shadows across the ground. His hand hovered near the surface, not touching, just close. The air felt cooler here, not cold, just still. Elias listened. The silence deepened, and then, very faintly, so faint it seemed to come not from the air, but from somewhere within the quiet itself, the bell sounded, a single, soft tone. Elias did not turn. He remained where he was. The sound faded. The night closed again. The stone remained. The mark, unchanged. Elias slowly lowered his hand. He did not touch the surface. Instead, he rose. The lantern lifted with him. He stepped back. The light shifted, leaving the stone once more in shadow. Only the faint outline remained. Elias turned. The path lay before him, familiar, unchanged. Step and sway, step and sway. He began to walk again, but this time he did not follow the full path. When he reached the tower, he stopped. He looked up. The bell hung above, silent. A rope hung straight, still. Elias stood beneath it, listening. The wind did not reach him here. The air remained quiet. He did not reach for the rope. He did not move. He simply stood between the ground and the bell above, as though waiting for something, not yet ready to be heard. The lantern burned steadily. The night held its breath. And somewhere within the stillness, something remained, unanswered. The night moved slowly onward, not forward, not passing, but settling deeper into itself. The graveyard lay unchanged. The stones remained where they had always been. The tree stood in its quiet place. The tower rose above them, still, watching. And Elias walked, step and sway, step and sway. The lantern moved gently at his side. Its light reached only a little way ahead, touching the path, the edges of stone, the soft rise of the ground. Everything was familiar, and yet something had shifted, not in the yard, not in the air, but in the way the night was felt. Elias moved toward the far edge, once more, toward the older stones, toward the place where the ground dipped low. The path curved gently beneath his feet, as it always had, but tonight it seemed longer, not by distance, but by time. Each step felt slower, as though the space between one moment and the next had widened. Elias did not resist it. He allowed the rhythm to change, step and sway, step. The lantern flame moved softly, a quiet shift, then steadiness again. The yew tree stood ahead. Its branches did not move. The air around it remained still. Elias passed beneath it. For a moment, he paused, not by decision, not by thought, just stillness. The lantern light rested against the trunk. The bark seemed deeper, its lines more pronounced, as though something beneath it had been waiting to be seen. Elias listened. Nothing, only the quiet. He continued on. The ground dipped. The older stones appeared, and the nameless grave. Elias approached. The lantern light touched its surface. The crack across the stone seemed wider tonight, not broken, not changed, just more visible. Elias stood beside it. He did not kneel. He did not move closer. He simply remained. The night gathered, and then, very faintly, the bell sounded. Once, soft. Elias did not turn. The sound lingered, just long enough to be known, then faded. The silence returned. But this time, it did not feel empty. It felt full, as though something had been placed within it. Elias lifted the lantern slightly. The light moved outward and fell upon the ground. Something was different. Not the grave, not the tree, the path. The narrow line of earth he had walked for years had shifted, only slightly, barely enough to notice, but enough. Elias stepped back. The lantern swayed. The path curved, just a little to the left, where before it had gone straight. Elias watched it. He did not question. He did not measure. He simply observed. The ground held no mark of disturbance, no sign of movement. And yet, the path was not the same. Elias took a step. The earth felt firm beneath his foot, unchanged. He took another step and sway. The lantern light moved ahead. The path led him, not toward the tower, but slightly away from it, toward the center of the yard, toward the small stone, the one with the mark. Elias stopped. The stone stood in shadow. He lifted the lantern. The light reached it slowly. The mark appeared again, 4 faint lines, but now they seemed deeper, not newly made, but clearer, as though something had drawn them out from the stone itself. Elias stood before it. The night held still. The wind did not move. The tree was silent. Even the distant village seemed farther away. He listened. Nothing. Then a sound, not the bell, closer, a soft, measured step. Elias did not turn. The sound came again, behind him, slow, even, as though someone walked along the path he had just left. Step, silence, step. Elias remained still. The lantern flame flickered once, then steadied. The sound stopped. The graveyard returned to its quiet. Elias turned, slowly. The path behind him lay empty. No movement, no shape, only the stones, the tree, the quiet. Elias watched for a moment longer, then turned back to the stone. The mark remained, still, but now it did not feel alone. Elias lowered the lantern slightly. The light softened. The shadows grew longer. He stood there, between the shifted path, the silent tower, and the stone with its quiet mark, listening, as though the night itself had begun to walk, and he had only just noticed. The night did not move. It did not pass. It did not change. It simply held. Elias remained beside the small stone. The lantern rested in his hand, its light steady, low, and warm. The mark was still there, 4 faint lines, close together, unchanged, yet clearer than before. Behind him, the path, empty, and yet he had heard it, a step, soft, measured, not his own. Elias did not turn again. He did not search the yard. He listened. The silence deepened, not empty, but full, as though something now rested within it. The wind did not move. The tree did not whisper. Even the distant village seemed farther away. Elias stood between the stone and the unseen space behind him, waiting. A moment passed, then another. Time loosened, and then, very softly, a step. This time, ahead of him, not behind, not near, just present. Elias lifted the lantern. The light moved outward, touching the ground before him. Nothing, only the earth, only the path. And yet, the sound had been there, clear. Elias took a step forward. Step and sway. The lantern followed. It did not hurry. He did not slow. He walked. Another step. The ground felt the same, firm, unchanged. And then a second step, not his own, just beside his, soft, measured. Elias stopped. The lantern flame flickered, then steadied. The air remained still. He lowered his gaze. The ground showed nothing, no mark, no imprint, only the faint curve of the path. And yet, he was not alone, not in the way one senses presence by sight, but in the way one senses it, in rhythm. Step, pause, step. The space beside him held the same measure. Elias listened. His breathing slowed. The night gathered closer. He took another step, and again, beside him, a second step followed, perfectly placed, not before, not after. With him, Elias did not turn. He did not look. The night did not ask for sight, only attention. He walked, step and sway, step and sway, step and soft. Even, always the same. The lantern light moved ahead. The path curved, and slowly, almost without noticing, Elias was no longer following it. The path was following him, or something beside him. The ground shifted gently beneath the light, not moving, but revealing. A faint line appeared, barely visible, as though something had walked there many times before. Elias watched it. The second step sounded again, closer now, not beside him, almost within reach. Elias slowed. The sound slowed. He stopped. The sound slowed. The night held still. For a long moment, nothing. Then, very softly, a breath, not wind, not air through leaves, something quieter, closer. Elias lifted the lantern. The light rose slowly, and for a brief moment, something changed, not seen, but felt. The space beside him shifted, as though something had been there and had stepped just out of reach. The second step did not return. The path lay still. The ground showed nothing, only the faint suggestion of a line, already fading. Elias lowered the lantern. The flame steadied. The night returned. The tree whispered once. The distant village breathed again. Everything as it had been. And yet, Elias remained where he stood. The memory of the step did not fade. Not a sound, a rhythm. Step, pause, step. He turned. Slowly, the tower stood behind him. The bell hung above, silent, the rope unmoving. Elias watched it. For a moment, nothing. Then, very faintly, the rope moved, not pulled, not touched, just a small, gentle sway. Barely enough to be seen. Elias did not move. The rope stilled again. The bell did not sound. And yet, the rhythm remained. Step, pause, step. Elias turned back toward the yard. The path lay before him, unchanged, or changed, in a way that could not be seen. He lifted the lantern and walked, step and sway, but this time he did not walk alone. The night settled deeper, not darker, not colder, just quieter. Elias walked, step and sway, and beside him, though unseen, the second step remained, soft, measured, not always heard, but always present. The lantern moved gently in his hand. Its light fell across the ground, touching the path, the stones, the roots of the tree. Nothing appeared different. And yet, the graveyard no longer felt empty, not filled, just shared. Elias did not turn. He did not search for what walked beside him. The night did not ask for that. It only asked that he listen. He moved toward the far edge once more. The ground dipped. The older stones appeared. The nameless grave waited. Elias slowed. The second step slowed with him. He stopped. The second step did not come. The silence deepened. The lantern flame flickered softly, then steadied again. Elias stood beside the grave. The crack along the stone seemed clearer now, not wider, not changed, just known. He lowered the lantern. The light settled low across the surface. For a moment, nothing, only stillness. Then, very faintly, the bell sounded, a single, quiet tone. Elias did not look toward the tower. He listened. The sound did not echo. It did not carry. It rested, close, as though it belonged to the ground itself. The second step returned, not beside him. Closer, just behind. Elias did not turn. He remained still. The step did not repeat. The night held. Then, slowly, a change, not in sound, not in movement, in feeling. The space around him grew, clearer, not brighter, but remembered, as though the graveyard had been this way before, and he had simply forgotten. Elias lifted his head. The stones no longer felt separate. They were connected, each one placed, not alone, but in quiet relation to others. The path between them, no longer just a way to walk, but a line that had been followed many times. Elias took a step. The lantern moved, and the ground responded, not shifting, but revealing. Faint marks, barely seen, appeared where the light passed, not fresh, not new, old, worn into the earth by time and repetition. Steps, many. Elias watched them. They did not lead away. They circled. Around the yard, between the stones, past the tree, toward the tower, and back again. The same path, always the same. Elias took another step. The marks lined with his own. And beside them, a second line, lighter, fainter, but present. The second step. Elias stopped. The marks faded. The ground returned to stillness. The lantern flame steadied. The night held. For a long moment, nothing. Then a voice, not spoken, not heard, but known, soft, like memory, without words. Elias did not move. The feeling passed, gently, like wind through leaves, and settled somewhere, deeper. The bell did not ring. The rope did not move. And yet, something had been answered. Elias turned, slowly. The tower stood behind him, unchanged, but no longer distant. The space between him and the bell felt shorter, not by steps, but by understanding. Elias began to walk, step and sway, step and sway. The second step followed, not beside him now, ahead, leading. Elias did not hesitate. He followed. The lantern light moved forward. The path curved, gently, drawing him toward the tower. The stones passed in silence. The tree whispered once, then stilled. The village beyond the wall slept. Everything remained calm. And yet, the graveyard no longer felt like a place he watched. It felt like a place that remembered. And he was no longer walking alone, but walking where something had walked before. The night did not change. It did not grow darker, nor lighter. It simply rested. Elias swapped, step and sway, step and sway. The lantern moved gently before him. Its light stretched across the ground, touching stone, touching earth, touching the faint path that no longer needed to be seen, and ahead of him the second step, soft, even, not hurried, not leading away, only guiding. Elias followed. He did not question the path. He did not look behind. The graveyard held its quiet as it always had, but now it felt complete. The stones no longer stood alone. The spaces between them were no longer empty. Everything belonged. Everything remained. Elias moved slowly toward the tower. It rose before him, dark against the pale sky, unchanged. The bell hung above, silent. The rope fell straight, untouched, unmoved. The second step slowed. Elias slowed. He reached the base of the tower and stopped. The lantern rested at his side, its flame steady, its light warm, its circle small. The air here did not move. The wind did not pass. The tree did not whisper. The night held. Elias lifted his eyes. The bell remained where it had always been, still, and yet it no longer felt distant. It felt near, not by space, but by presence. Elias listened. The silence was full, not empty, not waiting, just present. The second step did not come. For the first time, Elias stood alone, not alone as before, but alone within something shared. The lantern flickered once, then steadied again. Elias reached out, not quickly, not with intention, just slowly, until his hand rested once more upon the rope. Cold, still, the fibers were rough beneath his fingers, unchanged by time. He held it there. The night gathered, and then, very softly, a breath, not wind, not air, a presence. Elias did not turn. He did not look. The night did not ask for sight, only listening. The breath remained, close, not behind, not beside, near the rope, as though something stood just beyond the light. Elias closed his eyes. The lantern burned steady. The bell hung above. The silence deepened. And then, without movement, without force, without sound, the rope shifted, only slightly. Small, gentle sway. Elias did not pull. He did not move his hand. The rope moved, on its own, once, and stopped. The bell did not ring, and yet the tone came, soft, very soft, not from above, not from the air, from within. A single, quiet vibration. Elias opened his eyes. The tower stood unchanged. The rope hung still. The bell did not move, and yet the sound remained, fading slowly into the quiet. Elias released the rope. His hand lowered. The lantern light shifted slightly, then settled again. The presence remained, not moving, not speaking, only there. Elias stood, listening. The silence held, but it no longer felt like absence. It felt understood. The second step did not return. There was no need. The path had been followed. The place had been reached. Elias turned. Slowly, the graveyard stretched before him. The stones rested where they always had. The tree stood still, its branches quiet against the sky. The small stone, with its faint mark, lay among the others. Nothing had changed, and yet everything felt settled. Elias took a step, and sway. This time, no second step followed. And yet, He did not feel alone. He walked. The lantern moved gently before him. The path returned, not as it had been, but as it was meant to be. Each step fell into place, not guided, not followed, simply known. Elias moved past the stones, past the tree. The wind returned, soft. The leaves whispered once, then stilled again. The village beyond the wall remained asleep. Time passed. Or perhaps it rested. Elias walked the full path, from the tower to the far edge, and back again. Always the same, always steady. The lantern burned low now, its flame smaller, its light softer. And yet it remained. At the far edge, Elias stopped once more. The nameless grave lay before him, the crack across its surface, clear, quiet, unchanged. Elias looked at it. He did not kneel. He did not reach out. There was no need. The place had been seen. The silence had been heard. The step had been walked, and the bell had answered. Elias stood for a moment longer, then turned. Step and sway, step and sway. He moved back toward the church. The lantern light dimmed. The night softened, and the graveyard rested. The night no longer waited. It did not hold its breath, nor gather itself. It simply remained. Elias walked, step and sway, step and sway. The lantern hung low in his hand. Its flame had grown smaller now, soft, steady, and patient. The light it cast was gentle. It did not reach far. It did not need to. The path was known. The stones passed in quiet order, each one where it had always been, each one held in the same stillness. Nothing had changed, and yet nothing felt unfinished. Elias moved slowly along the familiar line, from the church, past the first row of stones. Beneath the yew tree, the branches whispered softly, not from wind, but from movement. Remembered. Elias paused. The lantern light rested against the trunk. The bark seemed softer now, not worn, not altered, just familiar. Elias listened. No sound came, and yet the silence carried something gentle. Not a voice, not a step, a presence that no longer needed to be heard. Elias stood for a moment longer, then continued on. Step and sway, step and sway. The ground dipped. The older stones appeared. The nameless grave rested where it always had. Elias approached. The lantern light fell across its surface. The crack remained, clear, quiet, unchanged. Elias did not stop. He did not kneel. He did not reach out. There was nothing left to be done. He passed it, and the silence followed, not behind him, not beside him, within. The path curved gently back toward the center of the yard. The small stone stood there, the one with the mark. Elias slowed. The lantern lifted slightly. The light touched the surface. 4 faint lines remained, but now they seemed softer, not fading, not gone, just resting, as though their purpose had been fulfilled. Elias stood before them. For a long moment, nothing remained. Bobby understood. The night did not ask questions. It did not offer answers. It simply held what had been. Elias lowered the lantern. The light softened. The mark remained, and yet it no longer called for attention. It belonged, as everything else did. Elias turned. The tower stood beyond. The bell hung above, silent. The rope fell straight, still. Elias walked toward it. Step and sway, step and sway. There was no second step now, no echo, no presence to follow. And yet He did not feel alone. The space around him was calm, not empty, not full, just complete. He reached the base of the tower and stopped. The lantern rested at his side. The flame flickered once, then steadied again. Elias lifted his eyes. The bell remained where it had always been, still, unmoved, unheard, and yet known. Elias did not reach for the rope. There was no need. He stood between the ground and the bell above and listened. The silence answered, not with sound, but with ease. The night no longer held anything back. Nothing waited. Nothing remained hidden. Everything that had been had settled. Elias closed his eyes. For a moment, the lantern light dimmed behind his eyelids. The graveyard faded into quiet. The path, the stones, the tree, all remained without needing to be seen. He breathed, slow, even. The rhythm of his steps remained, though he did not move. Step and sway, step, a memory. Not of sound, but of motion, of walking, not alone, but not followed. Elias opened his eyes. The lantern burned low. The night softened. Far beyond the wall, a faint light began to rise. Not yet morning, but the suggestion of it. Elias turned. He began the final walk. From the tower, along the path, past the stones, step and sway, step and sway. The yew tree whispered once more. A soft passing sound, then stillness. The nameless grave remained. The small stone rested. The mark remained faint and quiet. Everything as it had always been. Everything as it now was. Elias reached the church door. He paused. He turned once more. The graveyard lay before him, still, at rest. No sound, no movement, only quiet. Elias lowered his gaze. The lantern flickered once, then steadied. He stepped inside. The door closed softly behind him, and the graveyard remained, as it always had been, listening. Morning came slowly, not as a beginning, not as something new, but as a soft continuation of the night. The sky lightened, gently. Gray, then pale, then touched with a quiet gold that rested along the edges of the village. The church stood as it always had, still. The graveyard lay beneath it, calm. The stones held their places. The paths rested. The yew tree stood, unmoving, its branches quiet against the softening sky. Nothing had changed, and yet everything had settled. Elias sat in the vestry. The lantern had burned low, its flame small, almost gone, but still present. A faint warmth remained in the room, not from fire, not from light, from stillness. Elias did not move. He sat, as he often did, when the night passed and the day had not yet begun. His hands rested loosely, his breathing slow. There was no thought to follow, no question, no need. The night had been walked, and now it rested. After a time, Elias rose. He moved slowly, not from tiredness, but from the quiet weight of completion. He took the lantern. The flame flickered once, then steadied. He opened the church door. The morning air met him, cool, soft. The graveyard lay before him, unchanged. The stones remained. The paths were still. The tree stood in silence. Elias stepped outside. He paused at the threshold, as he always did. He turned. His gaze moved slowly across the yard, the first row of stones, the path, the tree, the far edge where the ground dipped, and the tower above. The bell hung there, still, silent, unmoving, as it had always been. Elias watched it. There was no expectation, no listening for sound, only seeing. The bell did not move. The rope hung straight. The morning light touched the stone, the wood, the air, and everything remained at rest. Elias lowered his gaze. He began to walk, not as he had through the night, not step and sway, but simply walking. The path felt different beneath his feet, not changed, just lighter. He moved past the stones. The names, worn by time, remained quiet. They did not call, they did not ask, they rested. Elias passed beneath the yew tree. Its branches did not move, no whisper, only stillness. He continued on. The ground dipped. The older stones appeared. The nameless grave lay before him. Elias approached. The morning light touched its surface. The crack remained, clear, quiet, unchanged. Elias. For a moment, he simply looked, not searching, not remembering, only present. Then he stepped past it. There was no need to stop. The path continued. He followed it, toward the center of the yard. The small stone stood there, the one with the mark. Elias slowed. The light touched it. The surface was worn. The lines were gone, not faded, not hidden, gone. The stone remained, but the mark no longer held. Elias stood before it. The silence around him was soft, complete. Nothing stirred, nothing waited. He did not reach out. There was no need. He turned. The path led him back, toward the church, toward the door. Elias walked, each step steady, each movement quiet. The graveyard lay behind him, unchanged, at rest. He reached the door. He paused. He turned once more. The yard stretched before him. The stones, the tree, the path, all as they had been, all as they remained. The tower rose above. The bell hung still, silent. And now it asked nothing. Elias watched for a moment longer. Then he lowered his gaze and stepped inside. The door closed softly behind him. The room held its quiet. The lantern was set down. The flame flickered and slowly, gently, went out. Darkness remained, but it was not empty. It was calm. Outside, the morning grew. Light spread across the stones. The wind moved gently through the tree. The village woke. Doors opened. Voices rose. Life returned, and the graveyard remained, still, listening, as it always had and always would.